Susanna, where are you? Somewhere on the East Coast?
Yep, I'm in Connecticut.
What's it like there?
It's very nice. It's things are turning green and there are lots of early flowers and things out, which is fun. And the weather's been very nice so far.
Good.
It looks a bit snowy in your backyard.
No, it's not snow. What do we see?
Okay. Oh, I see.
I don't know what, I think it's my porch reflecting the
No.
stones. No.
Bright spring sun, thankfully.
Right,
Okay,
right.
we're live, guys.
Great,
Okay.
thank you, Bonnie.
So we're missing, or I can't see everyone.
Tyler, Jason, and Kathy on, so that's a quorum, right?
Yep.
All right,
And Timothy just joined too.
great.
Hello.
Good evening. We're just getting started, just calling the meeting to order. And so we do have a quorum. And do we need to do roll? We do this infrequently enough that I forget.
Yes, please.
Yes. All right. So let's just go around with the HPC members. Jason James is present.
Kathy Montgomery, present.
Justin Abad, present.
Taylor Loxton present.
All right. I think we are underway. And Susanna, it looked like you had a few things on the staff report for some staff comments.
Yep. I provided you meeting notes from our last meeting. Just because we have a couple of new members, I want to remind you that these are just kind of notes of the highlights. The actual official meeting minutes are the recording of the Zoom call. So if you need to refresh your memory about any actions that were taken at the previous meeting or discussions, that's where you should go. And Justin, since you weren't at the last meeting, it's typically preferable that you listen to the recording of the minutes of that meeting or the tape of that meeting, just to familiarize yourself with the previous discussion on the case that we're discussing tonight. So hopefully you had a chance to do that a little bit.
Yes, I gave it a quick listen, but not very thorough to be candid. Sorry, but I did give it a quick listen.
Okay, great. I approved a re-roof for 326 Redstone Boulevard. They are putting in a new asphalt shingle roof, which in dark in color, which is consistent with the guidelines. And so typically I just sign off on those directly and not bring those to you. 128 Redstone is the place where there was a kitchen fire a few weeks ago, and they've applied for a permit to make those repairs. And I'm talking to their contractor about what he needs to do to deal with the historic materials there. But again, that will just be an administrative review at this point. And similarly, the 17683 Highway 133, I'm speaking to the owner of that property about putting up a new fence along that area where there used to be, an elaborate stone fence. And he's proposing just a simple steel fence with basically cow fencing to kind of create a yard for his pets and kids in separation from the highway. So I'm working with him on that. If that's something that you guys want to look at, I'm happy to send that out before I sign off on that, just since it's a non-boulevard fence, the guidelines aren't particularly specific about that. So I'd be happy to share that with you. But again, that's probably just an administrative level review. So those are my things.
I think if you're comfortable with what you get, Susanna, I would certainly be comfortable with that. And any of the kind of standard county regulations for the wildlife friendly perimeter fencing, all of that, I think kind of drives what that's going to end up looking like anyway.
Yep.
Great.
I agree.
Okay.
Great. All right. Now we've got some time for items that are not on the agenda or other commission member comments, if there are any. I don't have any.
Me neither.
Nobody taking a deep breath. All right. Great. I think we can move on to the first main item on the agenda, the old business. And Susanna, you want to take that into the staff report?
Yep. 285 Redstone, and I'm going to put my memo up just because it'll help me remember what I'm doing. If I can find it here in my. Okay. So this is the project that we looked at last meeting, in addition to the back of the house on Firehouse Road. And I won't get into a lot of detail. Some of the issues we had at the last meeting were the question of the historic nature of the addition. I'm just going to scroll down here. That's existing on the back that was proposed to be removed. And the applicant provided us with some photos and descriptions of that, the historic nature of that addition, and I'll let them kind of go through those details. But I want to just say up front that I think that kind of the interior materials, the finished materials are not really relevant to the discussion of whether it's a historic addition or not. And the quality of construction is also not particularly relevant when we're looking at historic buildings. Those two things being said, I think we can make a determination of the importance of this addition to the broader story of the house and whether the addition really contributes to the historic character of the main house. And maybe use that as a criteria for making a decision on whether this addition is significant enough in its own right to warrant treating as a piece of historic fabric or not. So that, again, is still the threshold decision on this property. The second, I addressed slightly in my memo so that we can continue to move forward. If we find that that addition doesn't particularly have significance, then it shouldn't be used to drive the decision-making on the rest of the addition, and the addition should become more into compliance still with the requirements of the guidelines. The applicant has changed, kept the roof line of that addition here, but it only goes as far as the back of the existing house. And the addition still essentially has the same footprint. The new addition has essentially the same footprint as what they're proposing for the new addition. And I would rather see, if we're going to determine that that addition is not significant, I would rather not see that piece as a driver for the decisions that are made on the design of the addition going forward. So that's the essence of the memo. If you guys have more specific questions, I can go into that. I just want to kind of, get to the meat of the conversation and not spend a lot of time on the details of the memo. Hopefully you have read it and understood what I was getting at. So I'll turn it over to the applicant to kind of give us an overview of the historic quality of that addition and kind of launch into that discussion, which I think is the most important discussion at this point.
Thank you for that, Susanna. This is Tim. The other Tim that's on there is actually Matt. He's using my link, so I think he came up automatically named or whatever. Um, so the main thing that Susanna brought up is that we've got an addition that's there, and there's a question about when it was built. In my mind, that's an obvious, we need to figure out what that is and the ramifications of that. But the other side of this is that what's on the house right now, if we determine that it is an addition, and if we determine that it is not historic fabric, and we choose to, for whatever reason, take that non-historic fabric off the back of the house, we're going to be left with a giant scar on the back of a house. And there's language in the code that says, basically, don't mess up the existing house. So in my mind, the way the code is written is we either have a historic structure or we have an addition, but we don't have a historic structure with an addition that might someday get taken off. And then there's language in the code that says how to deal with that. So the way I read the code, the way this all sort of flushes out, I think for the client anyway, is that he's sitting in a chair where there are rules on the book that apply to one condition and another condition, but not to his condition. And so we're in that gray zone of how do we deal with this in a thoughtful manner, both for the historic fabric of the town and for the client and his, desire to live in this house year round and not be commuting from Denver on a regular basis, when there's snow on the ground. So with that as the framework, one of the things that Matt found in looking through this stuff, I don't necessarily disagree with you, Susanna, that the interior materials, I wouldn't make an argument that somehow they are significant or relevant, but they are evidence. And one of the things that Matt came across was that the reason we took the photo of the Weyerhaeuser stamp on that interior paneling is that Weyerhaeuser didn't start making that paneling until sometime around 1940. So in terms of having some physical evidence on site as to the likely construction of that addition, it appears to me that the addition is outside of the Osgood era historic relevance, historic fabric, however you want to refer to that. And so I guess the way I'd like to begin the process here is see if we can determine whether or not we're going to look at that addition as historic and say it has to be saved or it can go. If we determine that it can go, then in my mind, the next question is, I see the language in the code and I recognize the reason for the language of things like a break between the old and the new and that sort of stuff. What I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around is if we take that addition off and we do something like a 6 or 10 foot separation, that creates some grading issues potentially, but it also creates more square footage, and we end up with a scar that is there that we have to figure out how to rebuild anyway. And so much of I get where you're coming from, Susanna, in terms of not wanting the existing, addition to drive our proposed design. But having looked at the code and that sort of stuff, much of the reason for the design is trying to navigate this gray area. Now, maybe it's more clear for the board here, and you guys can, help clarify that for us. But those are the two main issues in my mind is is the addition historic? So I would like to address that first and answer any questions for you all with regard to that. And then B, if it is deemed not to be historic and we go ahead and take it off, how do we deal with the giant scar on the existing house? So those are my two main points. Matt, is there anything that you would like to add before jumping on to anything else?
Thank you, Tim, for covering those two aspects. I just want to interject more of just a more personal and livability scenario. So the addition that's there now, the kitchen and the bath that were put on, we believe after the 40s, structurally is not sound. So the foundation that they put in was built as a temporary kind of foundation. It wasn't mortared properly. So all of that has to be addressed. As it sits now, we're kind of in trouble. So we need to figure out what we're going to do there. So the house is not four season, and I'm just bringing this up for those that are joining us for the first time. It's a house that has to be shut down in November and then opened up again in May, April, May, whatever, when weather permits, when freezing, because all the plumbing's exposed and there's no insulation. Really, my entire desire here is, go in and update the house and make it livable. There's no heating other than an electric wall for heater, which is not suitable for the whole house. So we want to introduce heating. And the second component is there's one bathroom, it's upstairs. Now I'm 57 and I want to live in this house ultimately full time. And as I become 67, which is probably in a blink of an eye, there's an issue of going up the stairs every time I have to use the restroom. So there's a livability issue here. I want to have a downstairs, even if it's a half bath, and the upstairs bath, I need a walk-in shower. These are other things that you take for granted as you get older. So the primary motivation there is to address the structure, which is in dire straits right now. So my approach to this, just from a personal and livability standpoint, is if we remove that exact addition that was put on later in the 40s and we duplicate that roof line and all those seams, but we're just extending it out in length so we can basically achieve a more workable space in the kitchen, a downstairs half bath, and then a increased upstairs bath by default because it's right above the kitchen, where you'd have a tub and a five-piece bath with a shower, a walk-in shower. So I just wanted to point that out. It's a very unique and quirky home, but it does not lend itself to full-time living in its current state. So by doing this modification, basically taking off one addition and putting another one up in the same location, just increasing its size enough to achieve those two desires. That's just what I wanted to add to it.
Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. And I know the group is sympathetic to both the challenges of the small square footage and putting addition on small square footage and then creating some livability with some pretty unusual circumstances that you and Tim lined out last time. I think we are, Susanna, if you're comfortable with this, I think given what Tim had, those were the two items I had on my list that I felt like we needed to give clear direction on. That we're going to get to a continuance tabling to the next meeting with some clear guidance. Are you comfortable with having just a kind of a little bit more of a fluid conversation as opposed to sticking rigidly to the question and answer format?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
I think, we should have a discussion about, the historic or how to make a decision about the historic, non-historic edition. And come to a resolution on that. I think that's really the crux, and then give some direction on how to go forward from there.
Okay. And I have some thoughts about how to talk about that. And maybe before we jump into that first part, are there questions on what we've seen here or even after reviewing materials from previously that HPC members have of Matt and Tim? No? Okay. I think jumping in, oh, go ahead.
I'd just like to quickly ask, as part of us figuring out the historic nature of all of this, as you read through the code and the background and all that sort of stuff, the Osgood era stopped somewhere around 1920, late in 20, so let's say 1930. And so, are we looking for a date to determine if something is historic or fits or sits in the Osgood era? Or is it just the fact that it is something that is attached to something that was part of the Osgood era that determines that? So that's one of the gray areas that I'm trying to wrap my mind around. So I'll just add that to the discussion. Thank you.
I would say that one direction the board could take is by saying that the significance of this house lies in that Osgood era, and that is the period that we're interested in. And this addition being outside that period doesn't contribute in a positive way to the significance of the house. So that could be one way of making the decision. I think it's not going to be clear enough to determine by materials whether this is a historic piece of work or not. It's just it's just unknown. So then the conversation, could be that first, is that end of the Osgood era our line in the sand? We could decide that that's what we're going to use for criteria. The second avenue is, well, a lot of the Osgood era buildings were added on to during the period of time after Osgood when Redstone was sparsely populated and additions were, outdoor kitchens and outdoor bathrooms became indoors, and that was a significant event in the life of a lot of these Osgood era buildings. We can decide that that is not significant enough against the significance of the house to warrant the preservation of that type of activity. So that would be another kind of way to get at it. And I think we just have to have the board just has to have a conversation about what they think is the most appropriate way to ultimately preserve what is clearly an Osgood era house and whether the addition has any value to that historic building. That kind of get at what you were asking.
It does. You mentioned it's just unknown in terms of whether or not the addition is part of or I'm not sure if you're saying it's just unknown whether or not the addition is part of the Osgood era, or if it's just unknown whether or not the addition is so-called historic. I guess, we took the time to take pictures of, layout, identify lots of different, what I suppose could be termed circumstantial evidence. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, why is it just unknown if,
Well, I guess that's the issue. It's circumstantial, and we just don't know enough. We don't have any records that tell us anything more decisive. And
So
that's what
the-
is just
so
unknown. We just don't.
so is that your position? Because even though there is siding in the house that wasn't produced until after the 40s, that siding could have come there sometime
Yeah.
after the addition was made. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, that physical evidence has a date stamp on it, and it's outside the Osgood era. But I suppose we don't know exactly when that physical evidence landed on the property. And so is that the reason for your position that it is just unknown?
Yeah, I think that and I think we should have the discussion with the board about what their feelings are, because
Sure.
this might be purely academic, but I think without any clear evidence of a time period, because they're parts and pieces from all different time periods that we're talking about. So that just there isn't, you know, a document that shows who built this or when. There isn't something that, you know, did it start as something else and become this addition? We just don't know the answers to that. So we have to try to find a different criteria for making the decision.
Perfect. Just wanted to flush that out as we begin the discussion. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
That was certainly some of the things that I had started to write down, thinking about this, that obviously if we had a documented history, you know, would be fabulous. We know we don't have that. Typically, we would want to rely on some kind of a scoring criteria here, and we really don't have that to rely on either. Susanna used the words "the broader story of the house," which I think is actually really important, and I think it has some specific attributes here that are at play, particularly where there are kind of public view, public access, where we can draw some lines on what we know to have historic integrity to it now. So I do think that's important. And if there were some kind of precedent, right, that would be another thing that we would potentially rely on. If we were able to look around the village and say, oh, there was a period of time where all of the kitchens were enclosed, or there was a period of time where this number of things happened. And so even though we don't have records here, we can infer something like that. I did look, USDA has some really great archives of aerial photographs. I could only go back as far as about 1958, and you can see the house on the black and white aerials. It's pretty grainy. It looks like the addition at that time may not have had the covered porches on it. So there was clearly a sequence of when this was done, which to me does start to indicate that it may have been a use like Susanna was talking about, that, you know, an outdoor kitchen, outdoor washroom that became enclosed over time. I mean, I kind of thinking about all of those things, to me, at the end of the day, you know, how do we best preserve and maintain the components that have clear historic integrity? And does that align with what I see as the public benefit as well? And that's not really a criteria for historic preservation necessarily. There's all kinds of things that are protected by historic preservation requirements that are not in the public view. But the north and south end gables and then the west of the building are clearly very well preserved. They've been rehabilitated in the recent past and are in extremely good condition as representations of the historic nature of the building. And I would suggest that addition on the back, and I think even if the evidence of the type of construction is very telling, right? It may not be specific evidence, but it's very telling of the way that it was built. And it certainly makes it feel less precious. Like Matt said, not necessarily habitable. I think it is more valuable to talk about how do we make an addition really truly meet the guidelines and preserve for the next several generations the historic character of the main original house, than to worry too much about the addition and how much it contributes. I don't believe it contributes terribly a lot. I think there's pretty good reasoning. To me, there's more reasoning to say it's okay for that to go than there is to fight a fight to keep it. And Tim, to your point, I do think that possibly, depending on the outcome of the addition design, triggers a restoration project on the backside of the house as a necessary component of the project. So that's where I come down. I've been trying to kind of figure out how to get at this, and those things seem to make sense to me, and they seem to be consistent with the intended outcomes and the intended preservation values of the design guidelines and historic preservation guidelines.
Yeah, Jason, if I might, I appreciate that very much. We are very much in a line in kind of that viewpoint, those optics. The main house renovation component would come online in the sense that we're going to introduce a heating system. Okay. And I'm wanting to put boiler heat in there, and the electrical is not trustworthy. So we're going to want to update the electrical in the main house, you know, and have that as a part of that component, we're going to improve the insulation, and there's some interior little modifications, flooring, et cetera, that will be addressed. But without a doubt, that house will be renovated to sustain the next several generations. It's very important to me. I've always had those optics with this property, more of a protective state. And with the addition, I just want to clarify too, really what we're trying to achieve is just what I was asking for earlier, just a little more room down there so I could just, as I age, have a downstairs bath. I think that would be a luxury. And the other thing is, this shouldn't really be visible really from the road because it's so far up back on the property and up so high up on the hillside. So, we could really focus on how we create that structure and that addition to just kind of blend in much like it is now, the way we've drawn it, but to, meet that criteria where it all makes sense. Right. And I guess that's just really kind of the discussion I'd like to have is how do we achieve that? And Tim, you can jump in on here and, get something goes from quirky and weird, a 2 weeks a year summer cabin to something that could actually be enjoyed year round, including the winter, which is a relevant month or relevant season in Redstone. We want to be up there in the winter. So that's all. I just wanted to thanks for addressing it that way.
Can we hear from the other board members as to what they feel about the addition?
Yeah.
In terms of historic point of view?
I'm thinking similarly to Jason that if we want to preserve the actual historic house, wouldn't it be better to have heating, someone being able to live there year round, that it would be much better for preserving the house, the part we want to preserve, rather than trying to keep something that doesn't seem to come from the era that we're interested in and is poorly constructed. So that's my sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just reviewing the guidelines too, and I'm in agreement with everyone that I want the house to have a great owner that keeps good track of it and brings it into compliance with all of Pickens County's building codes to live in it year round. So I'd have to say that I agree with everybody. I side with the owner just on the difficulty he's going to have with shoring up that foundation and doing some work in the back there. So it's hard for me to not think that reshoring up what he's got in the back, looking at these pictures, is not going to be an easy task. So if we can come up with a solution that kind of blends everything together, I think that's probably would be my suggestion. So I think I'm in agreement with everyone on that.
Thank you.
Any others? Don't know if we still have Justin here. Okay, and so it sounds like, so we won't be able to provide, to do kind of formal voting, but we want to be able to provide direction and feedback that you can rely on going forward. And so what I'm hearing from the group is that we're amenable to the demolition removal of the non-original existing addition, to provide flexibility in the back to create a addition design that is suitable for the livability. And then we've got some things to talk about there. I do think, and maybe that's a point of clarity, right? We're okay with the addition coming off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of straw poll. Kathy, you feel good about that? I heard that from Taylor. Great.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. I'm Tim and Matt, do you have a comfort level that you're gonna be able to move forward and act on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's to me, now the discussion becomes how do once again, I get where Susanna's coming from on we can't let the existing condition now drive how we design the addition. But there are aspects to what's desired and or required that, now is another discussion and that sort of stuff. And the main thing is access to whatever goes on a second floor. Everything that is set up right now comes off of basically a 2/3 up stair to get to the upper bathroom and shower area. And that's all a factor of how the existing historic house is set up. I suppose it's possible that the linking element to an addition could include a link on a second floor as well as a link on the lower level. But now we're talking in an area where FAR is very, very expensive. Now we're talking about a very expensive linking element. And so again, having read through the code and all that sort of good stuff, the reason that the design is the way it is so that Matt can have the maximum livability with an addition that can't be seen by the town unless they get up on his property. And it also, rehabs everything that needs to be rehabbed. It covers up the scar that's left behind. Basically, it dots all the I's and crosses all the T's, but it definitely does not create the so-called linking element. In my view, there's stuff that we can do with materials. Part of the reason that I left the shingles on the second floor and added the horizontal siding on the lower floor was that was a mix that was included on the CDU that can be seen shaded on that north elevation that's on everybody's screen right now. But all the materials could be created in such a way that it's very clear that even though there's potentially not a quote unquote linking element, that there's a very clear delineation between what's old and what's new, what's historic and what's restoration, that sort of thing. So I don't necessarily want to drag everybody into my world of design and nuances and all that sort of stuff, but it seems to me that we're going to have to either, create a very expensive linking element because of the cost of FAR and that sort of stuff if we want a second floor, or we're going to end up creating an addition that's all on one floor, which doesn't make, basically if you're sleeping in the upstairs room, now you got to go downstairs to get to a bathroom in order not to have a double-story linking element. So I hope that clarifies my biggest concern and the reason for the proposal the way it is. And I agree with you all. I think it's okay to take that portion of the house off. However, I think there are other ways to deal with making a house that is historic live with a portion that's new, even though it doesn't have what the code calls a linking element, or potentially doesn't have that. So I guess that's where, now that we've all sort of determined and are in agreement that addition can come off, now we're sort of in the minutia of, okay, so that doesn't necessarily fix the problem. It just brings up
Tim,
other
what
issues.
does
So go ahead.
FAR mean?
Floor area ratio. So basically the county says, based on the size of your property, 0.13, I think is the number, but it's point something times the actual square footage of the property gives you a number. And I think for us, it's like 3,400 square feet. So that's what we're dealing with is we have a maximum amount of floor area that we can build. Floor area ratio, FAR.
So I've got a couple of thoughts here. And I think they relate to some of the challenges, Tim, that you're talking about, and the difficulty of having a quote unquote main house that is so small to begin with, and the relationship to what I think is actually the most important part of the way mass and scale is handled in dealing with historic structures. And so that's kind of where my focus has been in thinking about and looking at this, is that the relationship of massing, comparative mass and scale. It's one of the few places in Susanna's memo that the word requires is used. And I also think because of the small size of the house, it is kind of outsized level of importance here. And I'm not particularly concerned with, personally, I'm not particularly concerned with the square footage, nearly doubling with the addition. But I do think the one of the kind of strongest and most successful requirements, and you see it throughout Pickens County, you see it in the city of Aspen for treatment of historic buildings as well, is that physical separation and clear subordination of the new mass to the old mass. And that's fundamentally a challenge because the old mass is small. And I struggle to think when there's a requirement for the linking element that to me, that becomes so important. I have a hard time finding a way to supporting not having that kind of an element, recognizing it's a cost, it eats up square footage, it's an efficiency, like all of the above, and none of those things are necessarily criteria by which we're asked to review applications for modifications to historic structures. And kind of like with the potential for having to do restoration on the back of the house where there may be scars from the removal of the addition. The way I feel like we have to think about it is, what is the outcome? What is the end result? And in that same way for generations to come, what are we leaving behind? And that's something that I have not seen compromised in dealing with historic structures in Redstone in particular, but also all over the county, and particularly up in the city of Aspen. And I think that's because it is successful in really focusing on and celebrating the main historic structure while allowing for modifications for livability. And, fundamentally, this house is kind of a compromise generator. And so I know some of those design decisions will be difficult. I think it's possible to potentially have a two-story linking element. But I think it's also possible for that to be below the ridge line, like genuinely below the ridge line of the existing house. I think there are some things that could separate those masses in a very real way. And then to me, that really comes down to what compromises or what priorities are you going to kind of design into, and then what things are going to be allowed from a design standpoint, whether it's livability or square footage, to be compromised because we're dealing with otherwise an intact historic structure. So I think I'm just looking at my notes on another screen here, and I really feel like the mass and the scale and the relationship of original mass and new mass, to me, those come down as the single most important criteria or item that we'll be reviewing and looking at. And so I'm in a position of really wanting to see that separation that Susanna is talking about being required.
I would, yeah, I've seen the same thing throughout Aspen. I've also seen, I ride the Rio Grande Trail quite a bit, and I've seen examples of, turn of the century cabins with additions, and they have different materials. So they've done a good job making that separation, even though there isn't a, that prescribed pass-through type scenario. The one concern I have here, and the reason we designed it this way, there's one thing going upstairs that is really quirky, and something I want to duplicate is when you go up the stairs, there's a small landing and you continue up to the bedrooms, or you make a hard right and you go up another short set of stairs to go into the bathroom. That feature I actually want to duplicate. It's weird and I don't want it to go away. It's super cool. So that's, and And also in the main house, the living room that would be on the north side, that pass through to get to the kitchen is all the way over to the far side of the house. It's not centralized. So the middle of the house is the staircase, and right next to the staircase is that stone fireplace. So the linking issue comes in effect that it can't be centered. There's a staircase and a stone chimney right there. So your pass through has to go all the way to the side. But then I would lose the stairs to the bathroom that are in the center of the house, because that's where the staircase is. So, it's the, cut off my nose to spite my face. I don't know. It's one of those scenarios where you're like, I want to sure look at these guidelines, but in this particular, I'm just asking for a little more of an open mind, in the sense that this particular house, with the way it is so quirky and funky and beautiful and wonderful, that access to the addition is pushed all the way to the far side. It's not centralized, and it can't be unless we relocated the staircase or demoed the stone chimney. And Tim, you can jump in anytime, but that's my biggest, most obvious concern, is like, I wouldn't know how to centralize a link, because the link would have to be offset, cattywampus almost. It'd be all the way to the one side. It'd be, I mean, I think it would be a detriment. I don't think it would make sense because it couldn't be centralized. Tim, do you have better
Yeah.
words?
So the what we're can everybody see the screen showing
Yes.
the
I think I just,
okay. So this butler pantry is part of the addition, and from that wall to this long dash line here is the width of the existing kitchen. And what Matt is talking about is right above this spot right here. You come up the stairs, do a little winder, and there's a landing. You go left and get to the bedrooms, you go right and get to the bathroom. The thought that just occurred to me is the other thing that Matt really likes is that butler pantry.
Yes.
And what I'm thinking now is, what if the linking element essentially was the butler pantry, that whatever it is, 6'8" of existing floor. And then I'll go up to the second floor. And that's roughly, I think that wall where we've got a toilet is where the butler pantry is down below. But basically, if that portion stayed exactly the profile that the existing house has, the existing addition, and stays the same size and all that sort of stuff, and that zone becomes the linking element, then Matt, you get what you were just talking about, a low ceiling area as you get up into the bathroom. This maybe becomes something else, or maybe it's not there at all. But basically we end up with a low ceiling area upstairs that links to something that maybe on the ground floor is the same width, or maybe there's a bump out. But basically, right now the porch that was filled in that you were talking about a minute ago, Jason, is right in this area. So, my thought is that basically we treat this, 6-7 feet of the existing structure as our linking element, and then our new addition bumps out at that point. Maybe it bumps out over here, or maybe it bumps in, but somehow we create a bubble beyond that linking element, or beyond that point. So we have a zone that's 6 or 7 feet wide that is that linking element. And then we have something else beyond it that has a lower profile roof. I agree with you, Jason. Right now, the reason for the high ridge on the proposed addition is just to have, I think it's a 912 roof slope. I mean, we could easily still shed snow and that sort of stuff on a 612. So there's definitely things that could bring that mass down. And let's see here. Elevations don't show the existing. I'll go back. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, still
Yep.
looking at the kitchen.
Okay. So this is the existing um, uh, gable that sits on top of the roof or sits on top of the historic house right now. So what I was just describing basically would be about this much of the house would become or would basically stay as it is in some fashion or get rebuilt or something. And then from about that point on could become a completely different mass, a completely different something that is two-story that, we would have the option of having that roof be something that got cut off, and then this roof would continue over, the same distance, and we
Tim,
would
I'm sorry to
create.
interrupt.
Go
We're
ahead.
still seeing the kitchen floor plan. You may have
Oh,
to
all right.
stop and reshare if you've got a
Okay,
perspective
yeah,
or
I
an
did.
elevation.
All right, so stop share. Yeah, sorry about that. Please stand by. All right. It's what Susanna had up a second ago.
Hmm.
Um, so basically, right in this zone here is where the edge of that butler pantry is. So that's 6 or 8 feet, comes over about that far. And so what I'm proposing is that that chimney stay, this roof would carry over to about the point where that would be, and we would have that linking element right there. And it would preserve the stair, would preserve access to that second floor, all that sort of good stuff. It wouldn't be nearly as impactful as I was, apocalyptically, whatever that word is, describing earlier, FAR issues and that sort of stuff. But the point is that we use the existing thing as it was designed to cover up the scar that's on the back of the house, and it becomes a linking element as well. And then this portion of the addition becomes something that does not have any sort of gable treatments that mimic the existing house, something that was in rightfully in Susanna's recent minutes, and changes the materials in such a way that it does all the things that you're talking about, Jason and Susanna and others. So anyway, that's my thought. Keep the butler pantry and that much of the house and the addition that Matt likes, and use that as the spring point for something new and different.
So that way we still have the same access to the kitchen that we have now. You walk through the butler's pantry, make a hard right to get into the kitchen. So the link would be the same. You would walk through there, through the butler's pantry, into the kitchen, but then you'd make a hard left to go into the kitchen because it would be a separate structure just to separate the house from the addition. Is that what you're saying?
It is, and I'm gonna.
Is Jason, that's kind of what you were alluding to have that link that way?
I'm not sure I understand exactly that kind of circulation. I think I understand generally what Tim is talking about. And so would that over the butler pantry, you would be at that kind of 1-story
Yeah, it's
plate?
not optimal. I mean, it like Tim said, it'll be a kind of a shame to waste the space, and it won't be fluid. Um, it'll be what it is going downstairs. The upstairs you're gonna have to redesign because now you don't have a water
Hmm.
closet, a toilet. You're gonna have to figure out where that goes, and then, um, yeah, I guess it'll just. I guess when you walk into the bathroom and you get to the top of the stairs, you're going to walk 6 feet before you get to the actual bathroom. Is that right, Tim?
Well,
Like a
my
little.
thought right now is that, right, so what we've been doing is talking about something or we've been showing something that, you know, is all very much. Can I draw? I really want to get a pencil and
Mhm.
okay. I don't know if Zoom has that ability or not. It doesn't look. Oh, here we go. Let's see here. Select draw. See. So what I'm talking about is basically that area being the link. So now what is in my head, Matt, is that we take this addition and we mirror it so that we end up with something that does something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a linking element in here.
Yeah, the linking element has to be all the way to the south because that's the door to the basement. So we still have to have, yeah.
Well,
there-
so yeah, so
Gotcha. With you.
that all has to be there.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
by virtue of flipping this, we do exactly what the code wants, which is we stop all the things on the linking element and make the linking element unique and all that sort of good stuff. And we create something on both sides. So essentially, instead of the addition being in line with the linking element, now the addition slides south towards the CDU and could even have the same square footage and other things, but basically it becomes much more clear what is what. Let's see. Stop the draw.
I don't want to get too much in the weeds
ahead.
of designing at the meeting, but
Yeah,
I
I do
think,
appreciate everybody's. I do respect that. So I understand. Yeah.
but I think that, at least in terms of, how I would evaluate that relative to the guidelines, I think that's a stronger proposal than what we have before us now.
Sure. So unless there's any other questions, I don't really have much more to add.
I mean, that feels like the right takeaway to me, broadly related to that topic is the clear delineation and then clear subordination of the addition and the linking element to the main house, the original house.
I agree. So,
Okay. Any other comments or questions from board members before?
That have to be 10 feet. Is that the requirement? Separation between the two?
I think if we can, find a design that, makes a nod to the linking element, that I think that the board can find a rationale for not requiring the 10 feet. But I think that there needs to be a clear linking element.
I think they're gonna run into, as they get further back there in the back of that lot into some grading. I think they alluded to it earlier, but I think
Mhm.
it's probably better that they don't have to get further back there and put retaining walls and stuff like that. I think it would look better if that's linking element kind of stays the same, but that's just my opinion.
Typically, when we review and approve things, if we're going to make a deviation from the guidelines, then we just have to have a clear rationale for why we're doing it.
Great.
I like the idea that you can save that quirky staircase that way and still do the linking element and
Yeah.
really preserve the special features of that house.
Yeah, absolutely.
So go to work on that.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I don't think we have anything else. We really appreciate the conversation and the effort.
and we appreciate the feedback and the this is
And
why
you're-
we have these boards and so forth, is to get clarity. So, and to work through gray areas. And so I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much.
A motion to,
Oh, yeah, we do. We need a motion to table, right?
or continue.
And yeah, to continue. And we don't need date certain, but just to the next kind of round of application, correct?
Yeah, here's the challenge. Unfortunately, I have obligations on most of the Thursdays in May, most of the Thursdays in June. So we might want to pick a date in early July that works for everyone, so that we can, get back to this as quickly as possible. Maybe the second week in July. Let's
Is there
see.
any chance of picking another day for one meeting?
Well, if we could do something, our next normal meeting would be the 15th. That may not be enough time for you guys to turn around. Because I would need things from you by the 1st of May. So the next week, basically.
What level of detail would you want? I mean, would Tim be able to mock up something simpler than what we've provided earlier? Those plans are quite detailed, and I don't know that I want to get too far down the rabbit hole in that investment until I know kind of what the approved direction is.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be able to approve materials or things like that at that.
Oh yeah,
One
that
way
could
to do it
be.
would be for you to give us a conceptual plan, um, sort of outlining what we discussed tonight, and then we could say, yeah, that's the right direction. And then at the next meeting, we could do everything all at once. So we'd kind of have the massing figured out, but then we'd do all the materials and everything at another meeting. So that would be one way to go.
So conceptual plan and conceptual elevations as part of the May 15th, and then materials and stuff as part of early July.
Yeah. So if you feel like you would like to do that, I think that'd be fine. And that week I do have other dates that could work for me. It's just the 15th that I can't do. So if we could meet on Wednesday,
Wednesday the 14th.
yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Works for me.
Okay, great.
It's perfect for me. It's my 31st wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, we'll have champagne at the meeting.
Oh no, honey, I have to attend this meeting, so
I have
off
to
you
go to
go.
a meeting.
Love you.
Yeah.
Understand. Tim, I don't want to speak for your schedule.
Yeah, no, we can do that.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yes.
That's extremely exciting. Thank you so much for your consideration on this.
What time would that meeting be, Suzanne?
If you want to do it at 5 o'clock, again, that would be fine with me.
That'd be great.
Okay. So 5 p.m. on the 14th.
Okay.
And then that means that I need to see materials from you by the 2nd, May 2nd at the latest.
Yep. I can do that.
Okay. And then we can determine what our schedule going forward is after that.
Perfect.
Or do we want to, yeah, so we wouldn't lose the next meeting in July, or do we want to secure that just in case, or?
No, I will make sure that we can get a meeting in July.
Okay, perfect.
Works.
All right. Sorry, Susan, go ahead.
At the worst, it would be the 17th. Otherwise, we might be able to find a date before then in July that works.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So, motion.
I move that we continue to May 14th to resume the conversation. I don't know that we need more than that, do we?
Nope.
I will second that.
Okay.
All right.
Bonnie, you want to call the roll?
Tyler?
Taylor.
Taylor, sorry.
Oh, we lost your audio, Taylor.
Yeah. Motion. Can you hear me?
Yep.
vote to table it to continue to the May 14th meeting.
Kathy,
I agree to meet on the 14th to discuss the new plan.
Justin,
Yes, I agree. May 14th to discuss the plan as well. Thank you.
and Jason.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
great.
Great.
All right, thanks. We'll see you on the 14th.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone. Have a great night.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Hi,
Welcome,
Patrick.
Patrick.
Good evening.
How are you?
So let's
I'm doing
jump
well. How
right
is
in.
everybody else doing?
Doing good, thanks.
Pretty good. Um,
I love sitting on, being a fly on the wall, listening to these other conversations.
let me get to that memo. Um, put this up. So, as I said in the memo, this is a change to a previous approval that we made back in 23 for an addition to the store on the boulevard. And you can see in the drawings that I've included, this shed roof addition on the back was approved. And then the tree fell on this corner of the building and damaged the shed, which is here, and this corner of the building. So I suggested that the applicant take this opportunity to clean up some of this stuff that's tacked onto the back of the building that was tacked on over time and never really received any kind of approval. And so they've come back to us with a drawing that does, in fact, simplify the roof shapes of the new shed roof addition that was previously approved and rebuilds this little piece of floor area with a more appropriate, simpler addition. And we had previously agreed that this stuff would all come off the side of the building and that the dumpsters would move away from that side of the building. So here's a similar situation where we have this interior wall that became an interior wall over time through this haphazard collection of additions is now being proposed to be demolished. Obviously, it greatly improves the interior space in the store, but it is kind of the last remnant of this corner of the building. And the gable roof that you see here and this eave line is supported currently by that wall line. We don't have any structural drawings right now to show how they're going to continue to support that corner of the historic part of the house or the store. But we can talk about the process going forward of what we want to see there. But we sort of have to make a decision about whether this wall, even though it's become an interior wall, needs to be preserved in some way or whether it can be wholesale removed. The other thing, and I know Patrick has a revised drawing to show us, but the current proposal cleans up this little piece of shed roof here, so that goes away. And the shed roof from the addition becomes continuous back to the historic wall. The north side shed is here, and that's the shed roof piece that I suggested should be disengaged from the historic eave line to allow this historic eave to remain readable as part of the historic building. So those are the two issues, and I know Patrick brought a revised drawing of this condition here to present to us tonight, and also a proposal for how to deal with kind of the structural solution that might be involved and how we're going to look at that and review that going forward. So those are kind of the two critical issues that we need to address tonight. There's also kind of an outstanding issue of a shed that we can discuss now or kick that down the road if we run out of energy. This one. So I'll turn it over to Patrick, just so you can run us through kind of what you've got for us. And let me
Great.
stop.
Thank you so much, Susanna. I do have a brief presentation.
Okay.
Can everybody see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's telling me to share. Why is it not?
There we go. There we go.
There, you can see my presentation. Okay, good. So as Susanna did say, I did. No, it's not going to let me get rid of the bar on my presentation. But anyways, yeah, we've kind of tried to catch up to some of Susanna's good comments. So I'll go through everything in a little bit more in detail. But for the record, my name is Patrick Raleigh, Raleigh Design Planning. I'm here on behalf of the owner, CVP TGS LLC. Also on the call, I believe, just in the audience is Lisa Matson and Lane Calabro, who is actually the designer of who has prepared these drawings. So if they can maybe be allowed to chime in, thanks, Bonnie. Appreciate that. Of course, now it's not going to forward. Oh. Okay, so you guys have seen us before back in April of 2023, where we had. Can you see my cursor as well?
Oops.
No.
No.
I'll do a late. How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Little red dot.
I just recently went to a two monitor setup, and it's a little confusing as what monitor I'm actually presenting on. So back in April of 2023, as Susanna did provide, you did approve this addition, which is to the rear, and then this shed addition that would support the ongoing commercial activities at the general store. The historic resource was, largely completely untouched. And we did have some plans to start to clean up some of the sheds that happened over there. This, just to refresh everybody's memory, I'm sure you walk by this frequently, though. Here you can see the front of the historic resource. These dumpsters are still, unfortunately, in the front yard. We're trying to, affect these changes, but as such, it's been a little bit delayed. There's kind of these ad hoc utility additions that are hanging off the building. And then, as Susanna just mentioned, this is the shed that we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's just the general overall existing conditions. So we had all these plans in April of 2023 to move forward, and presto zingo, we had a tree fall on us. And this was the tree. This was from the previous submission. We'd actually requested the tree to be removed, and I don't think the county did allow us to remove it. But that's the tree that fell, and it fell across, as Susanna had pointed out. This is the northeastern corner of the structure, and it fell kind of across the corner, and you can see that we have some visqueen up there, some tarps that are kind of trying to keep everything dry. But that's the damage that occurred, again, on the northeast corner. And these are the original drawings that we have from April of 2023. We also found out, even though we did some coordination on the dumpsters with Mountain Waste, that the trash cans wouldn't fit in that space. So we were going to have to rejigger something in any event. So as submitted, and what you've seen in your packet is this condition. So I have the old condition boxed and labeled, and then this was the new. So originally we had the shed roof come up to that eave line. The other change would be to create a door, a side access door. This would be a utility door, deliveries and things like that, that would reroute, patrons away from the front door to use this side door, kind of trying to enhance and keep the front entryway privileged. So we had an addition of this door and a reworking of the shed trash enclosure to fully enclose it and get it out of the way. Again, the additions that were approved in 2023 remain unchanged, and you can see kind of, you know, how we were reworking the roof plane. Based on Susanna's staff memo, we totally appreciate the desire to try to make the historic resource read a little bit better. And so we've modified the approach, and I'm so, you know, I gave a heads up to Susanna, and I'm sorry to spring this on you at the hearing, but I think it's a simple enough change that you can appreciate it pretty easily. So we wanted to modify the roof form to indicate that the roof of the addition would be consistent with the once visible wall, and that the materiality would also be updated so you can really recognize these additions to be something separate from the original historic resource. So I think we have been hopefully successful. You'll see it that same way, that the historic resource is going to be more readily read from before. So as Susanna mentioned, this shed roof was dropped below the eave line of the historic resource. And so there is now a gap that's created in between there. And this has been carried forth on the rear as well. So you can again see the separation between the shed roof and the old north facade of the building. What we would do with materiality is that the cladding would be run so it would match and you could see a unified structure. As I said, the roof form would be lower to create that separation. And then the roof plan would all go to standing seam. So you would have the shingles on the historic resource and on this proposed addition, or the approved addition, I should say. And then everything else would go to a standing seam roof, again, to try to differentiate. I appreciated the conversations that you were having with the previous applicant about the separation. So in this manner, we're creating a different character so people can see what was old and what is new. As I've said several times, the other additions are not going to be modified. So that remains the same. And the materiality is also the same. This was in the packet. These are unchanged from what you've seen and actually what was approved back in 2023. And now we get to this question of this interior wall. Again, as Susanna has pointed out, this is the old wall, and that has been subsumed in by these later additions that have been made through the years. This former exterior wall is truly suffering from water damage. It has dry rot. There's rodent infestation. It's been stripped of its original materials. It's actually never been appreciated probably for many, many years. And the other aspect of it, it's built on a substandard rubble foundation. So when we're trying to do some things over here, that foundation would be preferred to be removed. And it was indicated, presumably it'll be a new foundation. Yes, it'll be a new foundation underneath this area. And here's just a few images of what that wall currently looks like. You can see it was a lath and plaster wall, most likely at one point where the plaster had been removed. The laths, the individual strips of wood have been broken. There's indications of lots of water damage. The current owner has put in these areas of plywood to try to keep the rodents out because it was open to the outside. And as I said, the plaster was likely removed, and at some point there was some type of barnwood siding that was placed on the surface. That has been removed. So there's very little of the original materials left. And it's also been damaged when they, kind of started looking at this and trying to deal with the rodent infestation. The wall has been cut into in the past. There were, openings, and also shelving that has been part of probably the general store for many years had also damaged. So it's a damaged portion of the historic resource that is not in very good shape. One thing that Susanna had asked was about the area of calculations of how much we need to remove, and Lane has provided that that's 320 square feet. And we would replace that with modern 2x4 framing and have the walls, the exterior match the siding that we're putting in. So that is the wall. And then just briefly on the shed situation, the shed is currently immediately right behind the general store. What we would like to do, it's an existing shed. So this is something that exists today. It's actually been improved by the owners to meet health safety standards for food prep. So it has been improved. What we would like to do is relocate it back to the rear of the property, try to conceal it some more. And, you know, if other improvements or enhancements need to be made to try to make it a little bit more visually appealing, if that's not accomplished by removing it to the rear of the property, I think we'd be happy to look at it with possibly Susanna and a monitor, if we could approach it kind of as a monitor and staff review. So we have the damage that was created by the fallen tree and a old structure that has seen lots of changes and lots of modifications, and it's not in great shape. As we were tasked with before, I think what this really has done, and whenever you do several iterations on a design, you improve what the outcome is. So I think we are truly really cleaning up these sheds now, really enhancing the north side of the property, so it'll be much cleaner, and also ensuring that the historic resource is visible. And, you know, at this time, it's probably a little bit premature to give a full set of structural plans, but we do have a letter that was included in the packet from Dustin Berner, who's a structural engineer, providing the general approach of how we would deal with this. And we, you know, that includes the removal and reconstruction of the damaged wall section using modern materials and techniques, replace that existing rubble foundation, and span over the rubble foundation using an engineered structural element like a steel or engineered wood beam to transfer the structural loads to the adjacent foundation. And then the damaged eave and the roof framing would be rebuilt. So we ask that level of detailed work, which is time consuming and expensive, be kicked to a building permit stage where, you know, Susanna can see this and make sure that, you know, everything is being handled in an appropriate way. So with that, I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. Lisa and Lane, if I didn't cover anything, I please jump in at any point, but I'd love to have a conversation about this.
I don't have anything to add. I think you covered it perfectly.
Thank you, Lane. I wish one of the commissioners would say the same thing.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Patrick. And I need to apologize to the group. I have another obligation that I need to jump to. Bonnie, I'm just hit send to you on some feedback that I have, if that's appropriate to be able to move the process forward. If it comes down to conversation about how we're going to move forward with some of my thoughts. So Susanna, can I hand this back over to you? And I think we've got
Sure.
enough still for a quorum to move forward. Patrick, I really appreciate the modifications, and not having heard Susanna's feedback. To me, it feels like it does substantively respond to her comments. I also had some concerns about the transition of the shed roof line of the new shed to the previously approved shed, and it looks like that modification has actually been made in a way that results in a kind of a cleaner, simpler elevation on the north side as well. So those were my two kind of comments right out of the gates.
Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. So Kathy or Justin or Taylor, do any of you have questions for the applicant?
I just wanted to say thank you for putting so much time and effort into addressing what had been brought up as previous concerns. And I know I'm jumping in a little bit late in terms of my commentary, but Again, I think that the ultimate goal, as everybody said, is to make sure that this gets done in a way that preserves the integrity of what the general store is, and I'm just very grateful for the effort that you continue to put forward as we move into this. I'll let those who've been more involved in the process make the substantive comment on it, but I just wanted to give my thanks to to everyone involved so far. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. Appreciate hearing that.
I don't have a lot to say, except that it looks like the concerns that Susanna brought up are addressed, and it looks good to me. I look forward to seeing a spiffy new back of the building.
Come in and have a skillet, Kathy.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. Susanna, are you thinking this still gets tabled, or is it something?
Well, yeah, that's sort of the question. It sounds like you all are comfortable with what's been proposed and amended. And, I'm happy to take it on as an administrative review when we have a little more detail on the structural solution. And if you all are comfortable with me just doing that, with the assumption that it will actually turn out to result in what they've presented to us tonight, then I'm comfortable with that as well. So unless something dramatically changes when we get into the structural design component, I would bring that back to you. So if you're comfortable with that.
I don't have a problem with them removing that interior used to be an exterior wall. I think that's especially in a place that serves food, probably a good idea. So I think and they have an engineer involved. I don't have any problem with just going to you unless something on the exterior comes up or you have questions. But yeah, I think they've got the right idea. I think it looks great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then how do you feel about me handling just whatever the updates that are required on the shed when they move that? Again, that's a shed that was never approved by the HPC, and we tend to discourage prefab type sheds. So it probably just needs a little bit of design work on the exterior to bring it in compliance with the guidelines.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Taylor. I apologize. Didn't mean to jump in.
Oh, good. I don't have a problem with that. It's just going to move to the I might be behind, but it's going to move back somewhere in the back of the building, correct?
Yeah. So yeah,
There it is. Okay.
there's that proposed or approved addition. So it really goes to the very back of the property.
Great.
The driveway, currently kind of just ends about right in here. So you're well behind the boulevard.
Love it. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be consistent in the way we treat properties on the boulevard, so that's why it's still lurking out there.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
great.
Justin,
Susanna, do we need a motion to move that forward, or what's the procedural
Yes.
movement next?
So you would make a motion to approve the proposed changes to the previously approved general store addition. And we have kind of standard language that we use, like if anything substantially changes from what's been presented tonight, then that gets brought back.
Right.
You should recognize that you're going to authorize me to review the structural drawings and any other materials that are required for the permit to make sure that we're preserving as much historic material as possible, et cetera. And that I can do that review at, pre-permit time. And you guys are comfortable with me signing off on that, provided it doesn't change anything substantially. And that you are comfortable with me signing off or instructing them to make alterations to the shed as may be needed to comply with the guidelines.
I'll obviously turn it to the other commissioners as well, but from my perspective, I have no issue with that. Kathy and Taylor, obviously, I'll let you comment, of course.
I'm fine with it as well. It's just one of us has to make a motion.
So
Go ahead.
before we make a motion, this is a public hearing. I wanted
Oh.
to you know that if we open it up to public comment, there are no other attendees. So we are good to close it to public comment too.
Okay, thank you. Taylor, you have thoughts?
I was just going to make a motion for, I guess it would be the alternative number 2, would be to approve it with conditions. Is that correct? And I'm
Yes.
understanding that. And that the conditions are that Suzanne reviews the structural drawings when those are available and approves the shed design, exterior design. So that's the motion.
I'll second that motion.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Kathy. Justin
I vote yes.
and Taylor.
Oh, yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I'd also make a motion to close public comments. Is that a proper to do right now procedurally? Is it necessary, or is that what we should do, Susanna, or what you recommend?
Yeah, I think usually we open and close public comment, which before the motion goes through. So I
Oh,
think
okay.
Bonnie has that in her notes.
Okay, sorry. Just making sure we're covering everything the right
Yep,
way.
absolutely.
We will need a motion to end the meeting though.
Yeah.
Motion to dismiss the meeting.
Second that.
Unless there's any further business, we're done.
Thank you
Taylor?
very much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good night.